Hello. Good morning, everyone. I hope you're all doing well. As you all know, the Big Ideas platform is not just about having presentations, having people come in and talk. A good aspect or a very fundamental aspect of the Big Ideas platform is to have minds, great minds, idea generators come in, discuss, rub their minds together, and most importantly, generating new ideas that you seated here can go on and run with. And God willing, next year we'll come back and hear what you have done with with the ideas that have been mentioned so far. So it's my pleasure to welcome the following people to join the Big Ideas, the VillageSquare conversation. A round of applause for Professor Mohammed Raji. Can we also have another round of applause for Mr. Apollo? Thank you very much. Can we also have another round of applause for Miss Priscilla? It's my pleasure as well to call for some of our speakers you've heard so far, Chine and Chuba Ezekwesili. And let me call as well Mrs. Anikeade Treasure. Okay, so let me start with a question to you, Prof. Doc. So what does the problem of mental health in Nigeria look like? From the perspective of who we are as a people, the perspective of the citizens, and also the perspective of the government, because there might be things we've assumed are normal, but in reality are symptoms of a mental health issue. What are your thoughts on that?
Thank you so much. Actually, before I answer your question, let me thank the organizer for inviting me and my other colleagues. I really enjoyed all the three presentations. And I think most especially the presentation by Funke-Treasure has made me really thank God that I'm not a woman. Because I've realized that I may not be able to handle the pressures that women go through. I really respect you so much. There's enormous mental health issues going on in the country. The unfortunate thing is that we do not have the adequate data that is really required. The cases we see in our hospitals are just a tip of the iceberg, actually. And usually that's where you get the data from. Unfortunately, the society has not realized mental health as something that is really, really very important. A number of times we have discountenanced or really made it insignificant. And because of the stigma attached, not many people really come out to mention the stresses they go through. Virtually every one of us here must have gone through some certain mental health issue or the other at one point or the other. And from what we can see, the presentations today, women really go through that a lot. And our younger generations also go through a lot of mental stresses. So, because we do not have the data that goes across the whole of the society, it may be difficult for us to really give figures. However, look at every aspect of our society, of our lives, and see where mental health issues can arise. When you talk about students, secondary school or primary school students, if it's in a public school, the access to education, the distance they have to travel before they get to their various schools, the quality of education they would have also adds to the mental health that they're likely going to have. We just got the lecture about what girls' child goes through in school. So also when you go to the workplaces, virtually every day, if you sign, for instance, let's say a file, before it gets worked on, naturally it should just look. things that will happen. You can fight from table to table. That's, no stress.
Let me come back to that, because I want to feed that into the question to Priscilla. Because he mentioned that one of the issues they have is data. And with the work you do at the Breakout Foundation, I'm just wondering, is there any link between, what do you think about the idea of feeding data to other institutions, like government institutions? Or is there anything going on there currently? What does this data look like?
Good morning, everyone. Data is very, very important. As of today, we have 30 convicted cases for sex offenders, and that's less than 10% of the cases we've worked in about 10 years. We've been able to render support for over 1,000 survivors of sexual and gender-based violence. And when you look at the record from those who get basic health care to those who get more professional services, by the time you start bringing in psychotherapy and all others, for us, you can't make any argument, especially with policymakers, when you can't provide the evidence. So if we are saying mental health care has become a priority for survivors of gender-based violence, as well as the caseworkers, for me today, I don't even want to talk about the survivors. I want to talk about me, who is providing these services to the survivors within my facility. If we don't have the number of caseworkers per NGO or per SAC, the SAC is the Sexual Assault Referral Center, or per shelters, as many facilities within Edo States or in the country that provide these services. By the time you look at the number of the NGO workers in those facilities who are on their own also being re-traumatized by providing services to the survivors themselves, the numbers count.
So how do you get these numbers now to policymakers? That do you get them while they're doing bills or working on policies? We just want to see if there is a gap, and how do we bridge that gap to make sure our policymakers have this data that they need to make these informed choices?
Post-COVID, one significant thing that this country did was to set up a national GBV dashboard, domiciled with the Federal Ministry of Women Affairs. And we also did something very smart with funding from the MacArthur Foundation and the Open Society Foundation by modeling that dashboard at our own level. So as of today, there is a Brave Art initiative, SGBV dashboard. So what this dashboard shows is data of all these cases, analyzes the cases, and even does data triangulation.
That is publicly available?
Yes, okay. Publicly available. So with that data, Edo State government is able to track these cases, and then we are moving beyond tracking our own cases as an institution to cases that other facilities in Edo State are also responding to. So by the time you sit here in the hall, you can just go to the dashboard and the data available, and you use it for justification for
wonderful,
response.
Wonderful. There's something we always say at the SPPG is, in God we trust, everyone else bring your data. So let me bring this question now to Madam Anikeade. We've talked about a lot about now. This is focused on children. Again, I think we heard the numbers from the CEO's remarks that due to poverty, we have children growing up under-malnourished, and they close that developmental window without having fully developed brain functions. But the question is, what can we do now as society, or as children, as a society, as policymakers, to help support the people who are in that situation? So we're not talking about maybe a 15-year-old who has grown up his life, but during that peak period of brain development as a baby, he just never got fed enough. What does this problem look like in society? You can also take it from the angle of girls. What does it look like as a girl going through menstruation with that kind of problem? And what can we as a society, as a government, do for them?
Right. I would approach this from our PATH scholarship package. So when we say we have a 1-year PATH scholarship for girls in secondary schools, I'll tell you what's inside our package. We have underwears, because on the field they told us that sometimes their underwears have holes because they washed and washed and washed. And then they told us that they also deal with pains. So we started adding beverages into their packs, the 3-in-1, so that they can also have something to. So you see, when we talk about poverty, it's one of those SDG goals, right? It's the number one, right? Hunger, I think, is number one, but it's one of the SDG goals. And when children do not have adequate nutrition, it also impacts on their menstruation. Not only their ability to assimilate in school, because then you have one of the causes of not even menstruating at all is not having enough food to eat, enough a good environment, an enabling environment to grow. So it affects the physiological makeup and all of that. What I think policymakers can do, the ruling party already has a program of school feeding. I think they need to be more committed to it, even in the rural areas, because it will help even absenteeism from schools, because if you don't have food to eat, there's nothing the teacher is teaching you that will enter, to start with. So you see, it is important that we look at the overall well-being of the children who, at this moment, we have more than 70% of Nigerians as youths, and we have another population of young people coming up. We need them to be properly developed, and we need our policymakers, our governments at the different levels, particularly the local government level. We must prioritize local government governance in Nigeria, because that's at the level where we can deal with the issue of nutrition and menstruation and all of these. We can create a comprehensive curriculum that accommodates all of these.
I think there's one thing you said I really like, because I didn't even know this before, that the issue of nutrition affects the menstruation of young girls, because you might have cases where they do not even menstruate at all. And the funny thing as humans is that if there is no menstruation, you cannot have children. And if you cannot have children, then there is no next generation. If there is no next generation, then there is no country. So let me go over from there all the way here, and I'll end with pause with you. So what does that issue look like? So if we say mental health in Nigeria, what does it look like? If you can give maybe one example or one thing you've encountered, or what you think is common, something that might be overlooked as normal, but in reality it's not. It's a sign of mental health, or it's a sign of someone having some symptoms. And I'll end with, when I get to you, Mr. Apollo, the question now is, often you hear people, when someone talks about mental health, the response is, what's this? We don't really care about that. We have better things to worry about. But the issue is, there are impacts these things have. And how do we sell the idea to the country, to the government, that look, you can't ignore this thing. This thing has consequences. So let me start from you. Yes,
we have this erroneous belief that mental health has to do with only adults. That's not true. Children also go through mental stress. Teenagers go through a lot of pressure that results into stress for them mentally. One area where people do not think young people have mental stress is in the living condition in Nigeria. We think they're not watching. We think they're not paying rents. Yeah, they're not paying bills, but they are as affected as we are. If your father or your mother used to live at a particular level of comfort and that has been jettisoned, you don't want to know how affected the children are. When there is divorce in the family, and there's a lot of that going on in the society nowadays, it has a lot of impacts on the children. They don't say it, but they're not assimilating in school. They're afraid. They have anxiety disorders that we adults are we're not paying enough attention to. And then I'm going to return to menstruation, because that's all I've done in the last 6 years. Yes, we need pad banks in schools. Some of the girls that I speak with say that they use their food money to buy pads. Some of our girls are preyed upon by zaddies and uncles. In our drama series, we had Brother Laulu, who decided he was going to take care of this young teenage girl. At the end of the day, it resulted into teenage pregnancy. So you see, the lack of access to pads can result into teenage pregnancy. We're not looking at that. So I think I've said enough.
Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate something you said, because I noticed that a lot of the things, some of the issues you brought up were around the issue of education in schools, where we attribute issues of poor performance to other things, but we don't really talk about what is the mental state of the child? And yes, they have failed the exam, but is there another cause to this? Is there the cause of malnutrition? What is the environment of the child grows up in? Because these things have effect on the grade performance of that child. Very, very good point. Let me go over to you, Chine.
Hello. Yes. Chuba.
I just had to wing it. I wasn't sure. I was like,
Next time, just say Ezex twins. I would say the environment. The environment in Nigeria can do a much better job to support just mental health. Like, we underestimate how much the environment matters, but when you're in Nigeria and you go outside, there are no trees, bad roads, flooding, agberos, or if you're in Lagos, it's even worse. The environment will really affects the mental health. And people might not realize it until you go to a different place and you realize, wow, why have we been living in hell when we can be living in heaven? So the environment really matters, and just the design of environments, I think the government needs to pay a lot more attention, to it. So that's what I would say is a particular focus.
so, Chine, what's your thoughts on that?
Hello. There we go. Okay, so I actually mirror my brother's opinion in terms of the environment. I think environment is absolutely necessary. I think right now we just saw a situation where they took light, right? And that's environment. And we know the toll that has on the minds of people is real. Just in terms of productivity, you're more productive in environments where you know that there's going to be electricity. You're just a lot more comfortable, a lot more relaxed, especially given how hot it has been recently, right? You can't imagine a person in a hot environment being productive. You can't imagine a person in a hot environment actually having the headspace to do what it is that they need to do to move forward. It's just so much more difficult when the environment is not designed to enable the right mental state. So that's why we're very keen on ensuring that the environments that we exist in are designed to be spaces that allow the mind slow down, and that allow the mind have space to see things to be grateful for, and that allow people take better responsibility.
Thank you. Just interesting thing you mentioned. You mentioned this word again, and I really loved it. Productivity, and it isn't just productivity as a person, but there's also the idea of economic productivity. Look, if you want the GDP of Nigeria or the productivity of Nigeria to grow, you cannot ignore the issue of mental health. You need mental stability to be productive. A person who does not have to worry about electricity or where the next meal is coming from can do a lot more in terms of economic productivity than someone who's constantly running around trying to fix this or fix that. So you've mentioned schools, you've mentioned the environment. Let me go over to you, Ms. Priscilla.
Just want to write on Anikeade, how we often ignore children and their own mental health issues. In Brevat, we always say that a hungry child is a vulnerable child. And that's because 18 years of work in rural communities of Edo State, the data is very, very clear. We have a strong linkage between hungry children and sexual violence in rural communities. You'll be shocked the number of children here in Abuja. Your child is going to school, you have a school park, and you have one of you, either of the parents, who is doing what they call school run. In the rural community, there is nothing like school run. I did videos yesterday on my way traveling from Igara to Benin to catch a flight to come to Abuja. It took me 5 hours from Igara to go to Benin to come to Abuja. I'm explaining this because most times they say, oh, you're from Edo State, you're in Benin. And I say, no, I'm not in Benin. I'm at Igara. And it's very important to always mention your environment and your locality. And because I left the house very early, so it gave me opportunity to see school children who were all heading to school on what? On foot. Some of them, maybe a little bit upgrade, they were then going on what? On motorcycle or on keke. Keke is like their own Range Rover in my area. Now, back to mental health. Many of these young children leave the house without food. Most of the parents in rural countries give their children 300 naira, 200 naira for what? For breakfast. They expect them to purchase akara and bread on their way to school. And that food is what is going to be on the child's stomach till 4 when the child closes. Some of the younger children close at 2. I'm even talking of public schools. So by the time private school, there's one lesson to extra lesson and all others. And then they see an adult on the road who then exploits their situation by offering them money. 500, 1,000 as the case may be. Many of the children are not even with their parents. They live with grandparents, taking us back to what? To poverty. Their real parents are where? In Abuja, in Lagos, in quotes, they are what? Hustling. And then at every month, maybe they send 50,000 to their parents, and they assume that 50,000 is what? Is big money. Meanwhile, 25 liters of palm oil is 65,000 as at yesterday. A sack, 40 kg of gari is 28,000 naira. I'm talking at Igara, not in Abuja. A cup of ogbono is 1,500. A cup of melon is 400 naira. Igara price. So by the time you check these prices here, and then you send 50,000. So what is happening? A lot of our children, like there's child trafficking going on, child labor, all affecting their mental health. They move children from one place to the other because now they can no longer take care of them. So what do? They send that child to me or somebody else who lives in Benin to say, go live with who? Your auntie or your uncle, and then the slavery and the cycle of violence and stress. Remember, these children then grow to become what? Adults. So I'm taking the transition. So they move with all this stress as children, become dysfunctional adults, and then it continues. That same cycle, the young child has been abused, grow and start abusing other children and herself, and then this cycle continues. So solution is now the question.
Very good point you made. I think the first one, on the topic of the cycle, someone who has been abused will end up or might end up abusing someone, and you have the cycle of abuse that keeps going on. And again, I keep going back to the topic of economic development, because you cannot have economic development without productivity, and you cannot have productivity without mentally stable and healthy people. So let me go over to you, Professor.
Yeah.
What was your picture of, or your idea of mental health in Nigeria? Are there things we've accepted as normal, or in reality it's not normal?
Yeah, it's definitely not normal. Unfortunately, the society has come to accept things as they are. I think we need to look at all these things holistically. One, there is the biological aspect of the individual. There are some, when we're talking about biology, means genetics. There are some certain disease traits that can be transferred onto a progeny. If a father or an uncle or somebody has it, it's likely that somebody might also have it, or a sibling, vice versa. So we need to look at that. Then we also need to look at also the individual characteristic of the person. Are you a smoker? There is a high chance of smokers. Apologies for those who smoke here. There's a high preponderance of smokers to cerebrovascular diseases. With cerebrovascular diseases, they are likely to have mental health issues from strokes and things like that. And also schizophrenias and depressions, right? Alcohol abusers, other drug abusers. So that's the inherent character of the individual. Then you also need to look at some of the environmental factors, including these ones that they have mentioned. Have you imagined right now what's happening in places like Zamfara State, places like Borno, Maiduguri? Think of a child that was born when some gunshots were rattled. That's the first sound he hears as soon as he's born. And then he keeps hearing this day after day. You can imagine the scar it will leave in his mind up to the time he grows up. These are things that you don't see scars on the skin like somebody was mentioning, but then it's something that lives with the person till death. Imagine someone seeing his father slaughtered or hijacked, or him being born in a captive's land. That is a severe damage on that person's brain until death. You cannot recover. Then we talked about the socioeconomic issues here. Yeah, I can be a professor, yes, but there are things I could probably afford a couple of years back when I wasn't at this level. But now it's difficult for me too. You understand? So they were talking about how this will also affect me and my children. Somebody mentioned that. What I can afford now, I mean, what I could afford before, I cannot afford. So my kids will have to adjust to that. You also need to look at the policy of government itself. Government has not yet realized that this is an issue that needs to be fully addressed. We spend a lot of money on maternal and child health, which, as they say, yeah, we agree. Women are the reason why there's a generation. But then the generation that produced need to also be mentally stable. So we need to look at this. We also, so that means we need to have intentional effort to get countrywide data on the field, not hospital-based data. Hospital data is not fully reflective. Then when you get that countrywide data on the field, you can now form policies. In these policies, you target the individual, socioeconomic factors, the access to healthcare. Now, when a person has depression or anxiety, he wouldn't want to talk, he wouldn't even have access to a medic to talk to. He would rather go to one malam or one pastor to talk to, or just someone who just, you know. So
yeah, I think a couple of things you mentioned that really struck me was the scars of the mind. You know, it's something that is not really visible, but has serious impact. And for those of you listening, you can see that the problem has come up again and again and again, which is data. How do you get data from the fields? Because the government needs this data to make informed policy decisions. So this is a problem that I throw to you as the crowd, as the audience, and our future idea generators. How do you get or gather this data, and how do you what's the pipeline like from the field data to the government? And Mr. Apollo, let me hear your thoughts as well. And he mentioned one thing is, how do you sell this idea that mental health is important to us as a people and to the government? But why should you take this seriously?
Right, thank you, Rex. I think the media has a huge role to play. It's a matter of education. There's a stigma already attached to the words mental. As soon as you utter the words, people start to think of the raven. Well, I shouldn't be, descriptive. The people who are mentally challenged around our cities, on the streets, and so on and so forth. As soon as you use the word mental, we cast our minds to these people. It takes a lot of education to tell people that, look, just like the professor said, many people are suffering from various degrees of mental illness. Some is treatable, some will require some medication, but first of all, you need to acknowledge and know what it is before you can move forward. So there's a need for a lot of education, and I think the media has a huge role to play in that. Truth be told, I don't think we are living up to our responsibility of agenda setting in that regard. There's a bit too much distraction going on, and so on and so forth. I had the rare privilege of interviewing these people, the speakers, during the podcast, and I learned a lot. And as an information manager, it's frightening to realize that we are undereducated about the critical things that are important to us. Professor, I come from the northeastern part of the country. I was actually going to mention what you talked about. There's an entire generation of people growing up that have known only one form of life, violence. Their mental state of mind has been greatly altered. In about 15 to 20 years' time, they will be adults in a society. So the picture of the Northeast 15 to 20 years from now is not encouraging. So while we're contending with today's problems, we need to project, look forwards, and anticipate tomorrow's problems and mitigate some of them, or else a floodgate is going to hit us. Funke-Treasure talked about inclusion. Lots of people are excluded because a lot of us are fixated on trying to survive today. We forget tomorrow is going to come with its own problems. How equipped, how ready are we? Nigeria's state of mental health, as you say, the data is a huge problem, but from what we see, we've not attained our full potential. I'll give a very quick example. If you've had cause to go to a mechanic workshop to get your cars repaired, I don't know if you've noticed this. They're very basic tasks. If you study very closely, I'm a curious person as a journalist, if you study very closely the way some of these mechanics go about troubleshooting, even the most basic tasks, let's say, for example, they're trying to open one part of your car and there's a thing there holding it down. It requires you to push, twist, and open it up. They can't even figure out simple puzzles like this. They might whip out a screwdriver and break or pop it open because the brain isn't processing properly. It sounds humorous, but it's a huge problem. Their brains haven't had the chance to develop properly at early stage, which brings me as a journalist to another issue as well. This came up during COVID. The school feeding program. Many of us rose up in uproar. Hey, who are they feeding? They're chopping the money, let us scrap the program. It's a very good program. UNICEF, I think, was in the 70s, identified the critical needs to give children proper nutrition at a certain age so that their brain can develop properly. We're suffering from that because we're contending with hunger. The brains, they're not forming properly. So part of the school feeding program is to try to get these essential nutrients to these kids. So instead of saying they're chopping the money, throw it out, what we should do, again, should be driven by the media and civil society, is to insist the proper thing is done because it has real productivity consequences. So these are just some of the conversations I believe the media can spearhead. We need to take our position right and proper by educating people. There's a general logic in life. A better educated people will make better choices. I think that's the general principle. So it all comes down to education.
Very good point. So I'll throw this question out there, but I'll come back to the answer later on. But the question now is, he's made a very good point. Educated people, how did you say it again?
That's the general logic.
That's the general, exactly. And then the mental health of the person being educated is also quite important. So the question I'll pose, I'll come to your answers later on, is how then do we evaluate or bring up the topic of the mental health of our leaders? I know we focus on the children, we focus more on the people. But how do you want to have the discussion that, look, the person making this policy decision, are they in the right state of mind? Is there something that they need to do before they make this decision? Because oftentimes, if I as a person or as a citizen challenges a government position, if I'm met with backlash, can I ask, is this a normal response? Is the person making this policy decision normally okay? What can I do? I'll come to the answers in a bit, but this question I will throw to the Ezekwesili twins. So we've heard that there's a lot of problems now in terms of, there's a lot of problems waiting further down the line. So it's things we've accepted as normal begin to take the impact on us. How do we then take a step back and begin to fix that problem internally, externally? But I'll take it from two angles. The first angle would be, I am a normal citizen. I've gone through a lot of these things. What can I do to reorient myself? Two would be, I am a member of the government. What can I do now to reorient myself to make sure that the decisions I'm making that affect millions of people, I'm making with a sound mind?
That's a wonderful question. Thank you. I think it's more than the things you can do as a citizen, but remember, the environment also matters. So if we're asking in the context of environments being held constant, as we say in economics, right? And what can you do as a citizen yourself? Then we can then be a lot more specific about the things we can do. We've just talked about the framework. I think for every citizen, if every citizen practices this framework, every single person just in their daily lives, it will completely transform the way we behave, even in an environment that isn't as suitable as we would love to see. If every citizen spends time, just a moment, first thing waking up and saying, what is my intention for the day? How can I set the intention for the day? What do I want to achieve? If every citizen slowed down, for example, if the mechanic slowed down a little bit to look at the bonnet and figure out how to manipulate the button, then he wouldn't break it, and then someone wouldn't be annoyed down the line. If every citizen gave gratitude, just woke up in the morning and said, what am I grateful for? What am I thankful for? I'm as hard as he had for Nigeria, man. There has to be something I'm grateful for. If we just did that, every single one of us in this room, just slow down for a second and ask ourselves the question, what are we grateful for? We'll find something to be grateful for. And just that little bit of gratitude psychologically will improve our mental health. And if every citizen said, how can I take responsibility more? How can I say I'm sorry even more? Especially because when Nigerians they struggle with saying I'm sorry. You see it in the road, you see it everywhere. But if we just said, what are the different ways I can take responsibility? What can I do differently? As opposed to blaming the government, as opposed to blaming everyone else, what can I just do that changes something, that makes something better? You'll find that mental health will be at a much better place collectively.
Wonderful. I think just to reiterate that topic you mentioned of gratitude, pause, think about it. There has to be one thing that you can give gratitude for and focus on that. Let me go over to your brother.
Okay, and this is in terms of the government officials, right? Okay. I think for starters, the government officials can join SPPG. For starters, just have them enroll in SPPG. I think it will help their mental health. As a matter of fact, I know it will help their mental health. I think a lot of times we find that there are government officials who will have the right intention, but without the right knowledge, the intention begins to decline because the environment they're in begins to shape their intention. And it comes back to what my brother said about environment. Environment is key. If you have the right enabling environment, then it means that you can be able to create the right culture. You have the right culture, then you have the right individual. So you have government officials, really actually enrolling in SPPG and learning what it means to be really great leaders. Then it means that while they are dealing with any of the pressure of what it requires to be in their position, while they are dealing even with an environment where there are other peers that are corrupt, they have a greater sense of who they are. They have a greater sense of mental stability in who they are because they have a greater sense of the values that they want to uphold. So for starters, it's just really that. This is not an ad, but really join SPPG if you're a leader. It's very key. But also just beyond that, I think it's important that we're actually creating structures that ensure that anyone who is being elected or put into a position is actually going through a mental evaluation. It is key. It's incredible that we give the keys essentially to the kingdom to anyone without actually evaluating if they're mentally sound to do that, to take over that position. And we wouldn't do it anywhere else or in any other position. We wouldn't. In any other company, we wouldn't do that. But when it comes to the government, we don't have a structure for that. We don't have a system for that. So it's important that we're actually able to design an environment that ensures that people are going through mental evaluations. And it's not just once, but periodically. Because then that ensures that we're able to catch any lapse in judgment when it comes up.
You heard it here, you heard it direct. If you're a public leader or future public leader, join the SPPG. Let me go down now because I want to open the floor to the audience here. But before I do that, just 1 minute each, I'll start from here this time. What would you like the government to do? Now, this shouldn't just be what you want the government to do for the people, but what would you like the government to do for itself? Because again, our policies come from there. What should they be doing up there to make sure that whatever comes out from there has come from a mentally stable mind?
Wow, what do I want the government to do for itself? That's a challenging one because the government is a thing in and of itself. What is government? First of all, I think we need to define that. And I think the definition of governance will vary depending on the context. In this particular context, you're talking about a set of people who are in positions of constituted authority that have a lot of bearing on our lives. I would like them to really come down and treat communities on an individual and needs basis, find out what their challenges, their requirements are, and then try to fill them instead of going around and telling people what the people's problems are. Somebody's problem might be water, somebody's it's a school, somebody's is roads, definitely not a flyover, I can tell you that much. But yeah, because it's the flyover, my capital city, Yola, I'm wondering, we don't have enough hospitals, but we're spending so much, but that's a different thing. So go down to the communities, find out what their problems are, and respond to those problems. That's what governance is, to serve. That's what I'd like to see.
Yeah, I would like to see this in a double-pronged manner. One, the government itself, and then what it needs to do for the rest of the citizens. For the government itself, I think I want to be realistic. If you ask them to hold themselves accountable, it will be difficult. That's been quite practical. If, as of today, you have already voted in somebody who is a drug addict, well, sorry about it. There's nothing you can do about that. I don't mean anybody anyway, but I'm just saying. But there are a lot of drug addicts in the society. In my hospital where I superintend, there are a number of people who are drug addicts. So, that's just a general statement. So, but what I'm saying is, for each individual it's a responsibility for each individual, whether you are a government official or not, to really look inwards and see how best to really carry yourself and do your own thing, and also how best to impact the individuals. So that's one. Two, I think government needs to also really now focus on the young generation. Let us nurture a generation that is quite healthy, both mentally, physically, and otherwise. And as we do so, we also concentrate on, like he said, do an intentional needs assessment and focus on those things and really try to treat the whole society as much as we can.
Thank you very much.
Because as it is now, I must tell you this, the access to care is very, very important. A number of people around here, within the country, really have this mental illness. I would tell you, from the rough statistics made, 80 to 90% of Nigerians have gone through some sort of mental illness or not. At any point in time, 1 out of 10 Nigerians, no, 2 out of 10 Nigerians have either depression or anxiety. So that's a huge number. And 80% of these people do not have access at all to any healthcare. So these are huge statistics that I think we need to address. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let me just go over through the remaining speakers. 30 seconds each, so we can throw the question, through the conversation to the audience.
Okay, my only request from government is to subsidize mental health services. For those of you that have tried to get therapy session with some of our renowned therapists, you can attest to how much it costs. I was sent for a therapy session in Lagos. My first consultancy fee was 60K per session. I never went back because I calculated the cost of traveling from Edo State to Lagos for counseling. I didn't go. So I had to look for a cheaper one within Edo State to continue that. So that's my own talk to government. But for me, what we're already doing at Braveheart, because we are all going back with a sense of responsibility and a sense of duty from here, is first, all our staff, we have these 7 approaches to mental well-being. All our work should be fulfillment and purpose-driven. We talk a lot about self-care, sleep, nutrition, and exercise. Exercise is integrated. I sleep at 7 p.m. every day since I clocked 30. I'm 41. So you call me for any event after 7, you won't see me there. It was a deliberate decision for my own mental well-being. Once I lock my gate, I shut down for the day. I don't pick my call. Number 3, positive outlook about life. Stress management, identifying your stressors. When my eyes are twitching, When I have migraines, when I have headaches, stomach cramps, I know. So I identify them. Then we normalize conversation around mental wellness. In rural communities, once you start talking, you don't decrease. You want to see psychiatrist. So we have to normalize that. Number 7, which is the last one, is medical care. Either you are seeing a professional therapist, a psychiatrist, or whatsoever. We have integrated this at Brave Heart Initiative. And it will be good for other NGOs that are working in very difficult terrain as us to have some of these. Don't start calling your staff at 11 p.m. to attend to your work. Let them sleep.
You seem like you have a very extensive list. I was wondering if anybody in the audience, where can they find that list? It's on your website. Wonderful, wonderful. So for anyone who's interested in, they want to find out what they can do as a society or what they can do as a person, you can go over to the Braveheart website and get more information on that. Let me go over to the twins.
Okay, so the government can do a lot of things, and I really listed one the government can do. But I think one of the most important things that the government can actually do is bring more nature, more nature, more nature, more nature. Just the more nature that we actually put around us, the better mental health can become. It is free therapy. Absolutely free therapy. So just more nature. Ensure that we have a lot more trees. Ensure that we have a lot more crops, a lot more plants. Just ensure that we are raising a bunch of citizens who are actually taking responsibility for bringing more nature into spaces as much as possible. The more nature we have, the better our mental health will become. Oh, there's a reason we're twins. Because that was exactly the same answer. More nature, more parks. More parks. When last did anyone here go to a park? In a government park that is clean, that is tidy, that has trees, that has grass, where you can relax, that is free. Exactly. So more parks, more spaces of nature for people to relax will really help.
Thank you very much.
All right, I have a message for all of us because we belong to one WhatsApp group or the other. And in many WhatsApp groups, there's a lot of toxicity going on. There's a lot of negativity about Nigeria going on. I had to call a WhatsApp group I belong to order to say, isn't it possible that something positive, just one positive thing has happened in Nigeria today? We cannot go on like, whining and whining and whining about Nigeria. It's affecting our mental health. Nowadays, I don't even visit WhatsApp groups because I don't want anybody to upset my equilibrium and the harmony within me. So we need to be careful what we say to one another on WhatsApp groups because that's a fertile ground for mental stress.
Thank you very much. And let me just ask anyone in the audience. So there's a couple of people. So we can't take everybody due to time. So I will do one there, and we need to hear from at least one of the school children that came. Let me go over to you there, sir.
Thank you very much for the opportunity, and thank you for the wonderful speakers and the deliberations. My name is Daniel Uche. So my question to the speakers is, what are the role of parenting in mental health, looking at Nigerian context? This is one. Second, what are the role of our education system and as well religious groups to mental health, brain health, and mental well-being in Nigeria? I have other things I wanted, but I think I have a limited time. Thank you.
So before we answer, let me just take the next question there and one of the school children. Okay.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Iweze Rose. I'm from Environmental Management and Occupational Health. I want to thank the organizers of this program. My comment is really, the Federal Ministry of Health, there's a Department of Mental Health in that ministry, and there's a mental health policy on ground, but the implementation is just another thing. So that is a just like an information I want to pass across. And then I also want to make a comment that there is a mental health linkage with climate change, with insecurity, and then with environment, as just the things I've mentioned. So my question would be that how can we begin to advocate for the mental health policy implementation? Whether we are doing it as a CSOs or we are doing it as a school.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Let's just take one last question for the school children.
Okay.
We need the representation from one of the school children. And once that's done, I'll come to any of you to answer the questions. Please, 30 seconds max.
Good morning. My name is Zinat Yusuf, and I am from Ansarudin International School. I want to ask a question from Mrs. Anikeade Treasury. So, how can we alleviate the mental state of menstruation? For example, someone who was menstruating and for some days they didn't see their menstruation again. Like, how can we alleviate that mental state of depression?
Thank you very much. So let me hand over to the speakers now. Please, 30 seconds each. You had the question addressed to you, so you go first.
All right. Thank you. I know that there are, as I said it in my presentation, that a lot of our young teenage girls are going through irregular periods and they don't have anybody to talk with. The only way you can eliminate it is to tell your mom, your parents, your guardian, and to talk to your teacher in school so that they can find medical help for you, because it's a medical condition, right? That's the way to go. Having said that, madam, you asked about the correlation between mental health and climate change. And I just want to say that for menstruators, menstrual waste disposal is a stressor. Because if you have to dispose your menstrual waste, right? You're wondering, should I just throw it into the bin, or do I burn it? We recall that there was a time that we had a lot of these Yahoo boys. They said they were picking these things off refuse bins. So it has a direct correlation to climate change. So for us, we pivoted from disposables to reusables because it's friendlier to the environment. You're in better control of the waste because you can wash and reuse. And what we're doing now is to even introduce the other one that looks like a funnel, what's it now? Menstrual cups, because it's even more environmentally, friendly. We need biodegradable, disposable.
Thank you very much.
Menstrual waste.
We'll just take the last question now on parenting. Parenting, yes. Go ahead, and once that's done, we can close the conversation. Thank you.
I'm very happy that you mentioned our religious leaders. As a matter of fact, they are a big contributor to the challenges that almost everyone working in mental space. They are the one who are fueling those narrations that people should not seek what? Professional medical care. Because mental health, all the challenges that is being displayed is assumed to be what? Spiritual. They are the one casting out demons from people that are suffering challenges. For parents, they are also contributors. I'm 41, I'm unmarried. So, and we know what that means in many of our communities. Some people won't even allow you to have a say in family meetings because you are a minor. So, and they put a lot of pressure on our young women, which has also contributed to the femicide we are recording as a country. A lot of young men are dying in marriages. They have no business even getting into those unions because they were pressured from home to get into those unions. Our young boys are abusing drugs and going to cyber fraud. It's also parenting. Pressure from the parents for them to get money quick. You go into politics, you also want to embezzle. It's still parenting. When you hear about SPPG, they are telling you they are speaking grammar there. So all you want is get a piece of the national cake. It's also from parenting and some of all these things. So they all boil down back. Every single person has a contribution.
Thank you.
So it's good to look at
Thank you very much. Due to time, I know we want to continue this conversation, but a round of applause to our wonderful speakers, please. Thank you very, very much.